my name is Leah Bostany, and I'm a lifelong Maronite Catholic. And I'm here today to talk with you about relativism. While you might not have heard that exact term before, relativism is so prevalent in the world around us. It's in our social media feeds, in the news, and pretty much everyone in our generation has experienced it at one point or another. Relativism is the ideology that truth is subjective, meaning that it's up to each person to decide for themselves what is good and what is evil, what is true and what is false. And so with subjective truths, a relativist is anyone who would acknowledge that what is good for the individual might not be good for the society, and vice versa. Well, I'm not a philosopher, and this is a very short video. My hope is that in discussing this a little bit more, you might be able to pinpoint relativism in your own life and start to ask some deeper questions. So what does this sound like in the world today? What are some real examples? A relativist might say, I personally would never do hard drugs, but I'm not going to stop somebody else from doing hard drugs if that's what makes them happy. Or a relativist might say, I personally would never have an abortion, but I'm not going to infringe on someone else's right to have an abortion if that's the right decision for them. And so in making these kinds of statements, a relativist is denying the absolute standard of truth that we are all called to live by. Imagine if we were to take that same ideology and apply it to something that's more universally recognized. Like if I were to say, I personally would never hit someone with my car, but if you feel like you need to run someone over, you should go for it. That's completely disordered, right? And we would never advise someone to do that, not only because it's hurting the other person, the one who's getting run over, but it hurts me as the driver to inflict harm on another. It actually does something to my soul when I live in a way that is harmful to others. The Catholic Church has recognized this in its whole history from the beginning, that there's this absolute moral standard that is the same for every person, and that references the natural law, which is everything that God created us with to know and to strive for. So the Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraph 1749, says, freedom makes man a moral subject. When he acts deliberately, man is, so to speak, the father of his acts. Human acts, that is, acts that are freely chosen in consequence of a judgment or conscience, can be morally evaluated. They are either good or evil. This last part is key. It's the actions that are good or evil, not the people themselves. We are all created good. And you may be asking, is it even possible to judge someone's actions without judging that person? Yes, we do this all the time. We all have friends and family who we love dearly who have chosen things that were not good for them. And because we love that person, we are hopefully able to speak up and say, hey, that might have not been the best choice. You might have made a mistake there. The one that comes to mind for me is when I have a friend who texts an ex and they had a terrible relationship with that person, but they still feel inclined to keep their relationship going. Because I love my friend, I can say, hey, you probably shouldn't get back in touch with that person. That's what it means to judge someone's actions without loving them any less. And so what does it look like for us to counter relativism in our world today, to do what the church prescribes and to live according to a moral standard and to strive for virtue? Well, I think we can take a lot of cues from Saints Peter and Paul, whose feasts we're celebrating. St. Peter and St. Paul were both flawed individuals. They were only human. Peter denied Jesus 3 times and had countless examples of lack of faith. And St. Paul actively persecuted Christians before his conversion and, was known for killing people. both of them were able to visit these communities of the early church, the Corinthians, the Romans, the Antiochians, and to say, you know what, we love you so much. We want to give you a moral code that will make you happy, that will make your societies prevalent and healthy and holistic. St. Paul writes in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, "If I preach the gospel, this is no reason for me to boast, for an obligation has been imposed on me, and woe to me if I do not preach it. If I do so willingly, I have recompense, but if unwillingly, then I have been entrusted with the stewardship." We are all called to be stewards of our fellow brothers and sisters and to love them and to lead with humility, the way that St. Paul and St. Peter did. I think another important thing the distinction to make is that relativism is not neutral. So often in the world we hear that, well, as long as it's not hurting anyone, it's okay. And the thing about living in a relativistic way is that when the same standards are not upheld, people are not free to pursue what makes them love to their fullest capacity. So to go back to the car example, if I really were to hit someone with my car every time I got angry at them, not only is that harming the other person, but it's actually keeping me from being free to love. I have this attachment, right, to revenge, and that's not healthy. So the same is true with moral relativism and even things that don't seemingly hurt anyone else. Those who view pornography, they may say it's not hurting anyone else, but in reality, they're attached to something that is not healthy. And so when we live by a universal standard and we pursue virtue together, the way that Saints Peter and Paul did, we are free to love and free to be who God made us to be. May St. Peter and St. Paul guide us in this pursuit of virtue.